It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The police watchdog launches disciplinary proceedings against the marksman who killed Chris Cabba, provoking fury amongst armed police officers. It wasn't me. The US economy suffers a shock fall in economic growth, but Donald Trump pins the blame on his predecessor. Mr. Trump is currently delivering a speech about the economy. We'll have the latest for you. Preparing for power on the eve of the local elections, we hear from Reform leader Nigel Farage on why his party is not a protest vote. A court has shown video for the first time of what prosecutors claim is the moment the Sycamore Gap tree was cut down. Plus, a community of compassion, the King's message to fellow cancer patients living through the darkest moments of illness. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Police representatives have reacted with fury after the police watchdog today launched disciplinary action against the marksman who killed Chris Cabba. Sergeant Martin Blake shot Mr. Cabba in Streatham in south-east London in 2022 after he tried to ram his way past police cars that had boxed him in. Blake was cleared of murder last year, but the decision to charge him led to dozens of his colleagues handing in their weapons in protest. Here's our Home editor, Jason Farrell.
Armed officers will put containment external.
A midnight briefing at Kentish Town Police Station in North London. A drive-by shooting has been linked to this gang member, Danny Downs. His DNA found on bullet casing. Intelligence suggests he keeps the gun at home. In the early hours, these officers aim to arrest him.
The subject that these officers are going to go up against has either immediate possession of a firearm or access to a firearm. Clearly, he has used the firearm in public space, so that's the reason why armed officers are deployed.
Firearms officers, the unit known as MO19, don't get paid anything more for carrying a gun. What they get is dangerous call-outs and a huge responsibility strapped to their shoulders. But when an officer who opened fire on the job was charged with murder, it sent shockwaves through this unit. Sergeant Martin Blake had been on a similar mission to these officers.
OK, we're going to do it.
In September 2022, police were following a vehicle because it had been linked to a shooting in Brixton.
Do it here. It's in line, in line.
When it turned this corner, Martin Blake's vehicle blocked its path. They didn't know who was driving the car, and with armed officers now on foot, the driver, Chris Cabba, tried to ram his way out. Seconds later, the 23-year-old was shot by a single round through the windscreen. Chris Cabba later died in hospital, and Martin Blake was charged with his murder. The judge allowed him to be named, and in court he argued that he'd opened fire because it was his genuinely held belief that the driver posed a serious threat to life. And in October last year, Blake was found not guilty. But now the IOPC says he will face a gross misconduct hearing, adding there was sufficient evidence to indicate he may have breached the police professional standards regarding his use of force. After the jury verdict, it emerged that days before he was shot, Chris Cabba himself was alleged to have shot someone in a nightclub, chasing his victim outside, shooting him again. Equality activist Stafford Scott watched the Blake trial and believes it left many questions.
What we have again is this notion of honestly held belief. That's why we've been trying consistently to go to the European courts of justice, because we won't get justice in this system, to make a judgment that honestly held belief must be rational. And let's remember, right? The media went mad about Chris and Chris's antecedents and what he was up to after the case. But at the time that Martin Blake shot that young man, he didn't even know it was Chris Cabba behind the wheel. No. He didn't know who was behind the wheel.
The Met has expressed disappointment in the watchdog's decision, saying it will weigh heavily on Martin Blake's shoulders and more widely on firearms officers. Like any operation, this one in Kentish Town relies on these officers having confidence in their training. And they are trained only to open fire if they believe there is a risk to life. But the Blake case has shown that their split-second risk assessments could be analysed for months, and with them in the dock.
Danny Downs, you're under arrest on suspicion of possession of a firearm.
In this raid, as with the vast majority of operations, the subject is arrested without shots fired.
So a knife found in a sheet found on one of the beds, and then the firearm found down the side of the sofa, which is quite readily available to the subject.
We got him safely, no shots fired. We can be nothing but happy with that.
The weapon seized, this Rambo knife and this gun with ammunition.
It is a satisfaction of getting the gun back, but unfortunately there's guns out there and we're doing these jobs very regularly. We get a gun off the street, we get the person arrested, and as with every firearms operation, a successful firearms operation for the Met and for the country in general is one where shots aren't fired.
Martin Blake could now lose his job. Campaigners and members of Chris Cabba's family welcome the additional scrutiny. His colleagues say he's already paid a heavy price for doing what he's trained to do. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
And Jason is with me now in the studio. Jason, lots of strong opinions on this case. What's been the reaction to the decision today?
Well, there are really strong feelings around this case. The Cabba family obviously leading the concern around the fact that they felt that the jury decision wasn't the right decision, and saying that they felt that what Martin Blake did was deeply wrong. They say they're still devastated. They say this should never have happened, and they very much welcome this misconduct hearing. However, police have reacted very differently, as you'd imagine. Matt Kane from the Met Police Federation said this is a nonsensical ruling. It will shock police across London and the country. They say that being cleared unanimously by a jury who heard all the evidence was not enough for the IOPC. They've now decided to put him and his family through more torment. I have to say, I'm not entirely surprised by this decision from the IOPC because, of course, they were the ones who referred Martin Blake to the CPS and to a criminal trial. So if they felt that it crossed that bar, then it's not necessarily surprising that they felt it should cross the bar of a misconduct hearing, which has a lower level of evidence and obviously is far less serious than a murder case. However, there is this argument that this has all been played out in court, all the evidence has been heard, and he's been pulled through all of this torment again. I think the big question now is, how soon can this happen? This has been going on for 2.5 years. He's had his life on hold. The Cabba family have wanted answers for that long as well. I think they'll want to have this as quickly as they can, but unfortunately, these things take time.
OK, Jason, thank you very much. Donald Trump began day 101 of his presidency, having to digest bad news for the US economy, with latest data showing that GDP had shrunk by 0.3 percentage points in the first quarter of the year, its worst performance for 3 years. But he was quick to put the blame elsewhere. Well, the president is currently giving a speech about the economy. He's already asked to be given a little bit of time to get the economy moving. But here's what he said earlier to his cabinet.
Core GDP, and this is, you probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is quarterly numbers. And we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country in so many ways, not only at the border was more obvious, but we took over his mess in so many different ways.
Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner is in Washington, D.C. for us tonight. So, Martha, protestations of innocence by the president there. But if the economy continues to struggle, it's likely to have a political price for Mr. Trump, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's any great surprise, Gillian, that Donald Trump would be blaming his predecessor when the economy is not looking good. Yet just a few weeks ago, when it was looking good, he was happy to declare that this was Donald Trump's economy. It's not yet clear when it will become Donald Trump's economy again, because he said if the figures are also bad in the second and third quarter, it will still be President Biden's economy. But one thing is for certain, the economy here is very anxious indeed. Stock market sliding again today. And I just got off the phone with someone who works in the trucking business on the west coast of America, and he was making the point to me that US and China trade shut down around April 10th this year. Well, it takes about 30 days for a shipping container to make its way from China to the west coast of the United States, to the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. So we expect the full extent of these tariffs to start biting in the next week. This gentleman was telling me he's very worried for the jobs of people who work in warehouses over there, who work in trucking, and for the supply chain too. He says it's not a matter of if this happens, it's a matter of when and how bad it will be. But he says there will be layoffs, people will lose their jobs, and people have already stopped buying certain luxury goods. He says people have stopped going on holiday in his business. They've stopped buying things like televisions and new fridges, and that will happen across the country. And it's that will make Donald Trump's position on the economy very difficult when people stop spending and the impact of those tariffs becomes even more deep than it already is.
Martha, for the moment, thank you. And we will, of course, keep across Donald Trump's speech on the economy this evening, which he is making as we speak. Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has predicted strong gains for his party in tomorrow's local elections, but denied that it will be the result of protest votes. He's also optimistic of winning the by-election Runcorn and Helmsby from Labour. He was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, in the final of our series, looking at the prospects of the major parties.
Your rivals like to say that Reform is still a protest party. Is that about to change? Are you going to be running councils and mayoralties by Friday?
We're not a protest party. You won't see people in this room in a minute sticking two fingers up and shouting. You'll see happy optimism. We believe that different leadership, different political thinking can turn the country around.
Expectations on you are massive. There's an expectation that you are going to win the Lincolnshire mayoralty, maybe win in Hull, that you're going to take hundreds of seats from the Conservatives and others in council elections, that you're going to win the Runcorn by-election. Is there part of you that think, God, I won't meet the moment?
Well, I said at the start of the campaign that my objectives were to win minimum 200 seats.
Right.
And to run Labour as close as we possibly could in the Runcorn and Helmsby
And how do you
by-election.
think that's going to go, Runcorn?
I think it's tight, but you know what? I do feel optimistic about it. I think national vote share, we're going to do very, very well. I think mayoralties, I think we'll win 2, maybe 3.
And which ones are those? Lincolnshire, Hull?
Hull will win. I'm very confident of that. I'm reasonably confident that Dame Andrew Jenkins will win in Lincolnshire. And I think Doncaster, spin a coin, but we certainly have a chance.
Starmer says that you want to charge to use the NHS, do you?
It's a Labour lie. This is the Labour lie machine. I have never said anything of the kind.
This is December 2024 from The Telegraph. This is you. The funding of the NHS is a total failure. The French do it much better with less funding. There's a lesson there. If you can afford it, you pay. If you can't, you don't. It works incredibly well. The French have a statutory health system levied from a mix of contributions from earned income and unearned income. You know, the central government funding and a little bit of a top-up fee. That's what's made Labour or allowed Labour to levy this charge.
Well, if Labour are upset that the rich might have to pay for healthcare, I find that a very odd position for it to be in.
Just to be clear, do you want it still funded through general taxation, or you think you need to look at the funding model?
I do not want it funded through general taxation.
Right, okay.
It doesn't work.
We are moving potentially from the two-party system genuinely to a multi-party system, and it's not just you. Tomorrow it's also the Greens and the Lib Dems. What's your greatest risk? What's the biggest risk for you as this changes potentially?
The biggest risk is succeeding at winning mayoralties, perhaps winning control of county councils and not delivering.
Not delivering, then it going wrong.
And then if we don't deliver, they'll say, they're just like the Labour.
Why do you worry about not delivering? What is it? Not
Because
the right
that
people,
is the
not the right
trust.
structure?
No.
Not the
That
right
is
policies?
That is the trust that needs to be re-established in this country. One of the main reasons we're doing so well at the moment, maybe I'm doing so well at the moment, is because we've lost faith completely in the two parties that have basically dominated our lives since the end of the First World War. People want us because we represent change.
And Beth joins me live now from Westminster. Beth, usually leaders try to manage down expectations ahead of elections. A very different message from Mr Farage, though.
Yeah, it really was, and quite a different Nigel Farage there. Less pugnacious, less bombastic, more in a kind of controlled and contained way, I thought, actually, in that interview. Slightly different sort of energy than I've seen in the past. Look, what's going on here? These are a relatively small set of elections, over 1,600 council seats, 6 mayoralties, and of course the Runcorn by-election, but they could have really profound consequences for our politics. And the reason that I say that is when you look back at the general election in 2024, the two main parties, the Conservatives and Labour, won the lowest vote share ever for the two main parties. And there were questions with the rise of the other, the rise of reform and the Lib Dems really battering the Conservatives particularly, whether it was the end of the two-party system. And I think what we're going to see this week is potentially the rise of a real five-party, real multi-party system where people turn away from Labour and the Conservatives and the winners are reform, the Lib Dems and the Greens. And when we come to reform, they are the party with the real momentum at the moment. They are polling ahead of Labour and Conservatives in some recent polling. Nigel Farage is bullish. I was at a rally in Staffordshire tonight. There was big energy. He's bullish. He's told me he could win 2 or 3 mayoralties. He thinks he's going to win in Hull. He thinks he might win in Lincolnshire. He thinks he could win the Runcorn by-election. Labour have a 15,000 majority there. Their 49th safest seat. He said he's optimistic about it because this is the moment where reform really can turn from a party of protest and turn that positive polling potentially into power, into pockets of governing in local councils or in mayoralties. And that's where the risk comes in. As you transition, can you still contain the party? Do you give policies people like? Do you break the trust? I think what we're seeing is people pressing the change button. They did it for Labour in 2024. They're not very happy at the moment. Do they press it again? It will benefit Nigel Farage. It will bring him great prizes. But as he said himself, it also brings great risk. And it really is a moment, as I said, of profound, potentially, consequences for British politics.
We shall see. Beth, thank you very much. A paedophile scout leader who spent decades on the run has been jailed for 46 years. Richard Burrows, who's 81, systematically abused 24 boys between 1968 and 1995 before fleeing to Thailand using a stolen identity. Sentencing him today, the judge called him a despicable man who's ruined countless lives. Our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, reports.
Richard Burrows was taken away from court to begin what's thought to be the longest sentence ever handed to a paedophile in this country. A man who for years used his positions of power and trust at a school, in clubs and with the Scouts to abuse 24 boys. And a man who, until he landed at Heathrow last year, had evaded justice for nearly 3 decades, living in what he called paradise in Thailand, compounding the trauma of his victims. The judge described Burrows' behaviour over 30 years as disgusting and despicable. He infiltrated one family and abused 4 of their 7 children. He cared only for his own selfish and perverted desires, the judge said. You have ruined countless lives, and I regret to say, I've seen no remorse. One of his victims to face him in court was James Harvey. Abused as a teenager, he's waived his right to anonymity.
I made eye contact with him as he was leaving court in one of the breaks, and he didn't recognise me. And that was almost confirmation that all of us, all of the boys whose lives he's affected, meant nothing to him. They were just objects for him to use for his pleasure. and that every single quality that he had in his life he used for evil purposes. So I felt nothing.
Many of those who faced Burrows in court spoke of blaming themselves, among them this man, the first of those to be attacked.
I wish I'd said something when it happened, because I feel that, in retrospect, if I'd have said something, then maybe it would have stopped other people from falling into the same trap that I did. But at that time, at that age, I thought I probably wouldn't be believed, was one thing. And I felt too ashamed and embarrassed and even guilty to even mention it to anybody else. So I didn't. And I regret not doing that.
The judge said only Burrows was responsible for his crimes. Some of his victims died before seeing him face justice.
Whilst he pleaded guilty to a large number of offences on his return to the UK, he refused to accept responsibility for some of his most serious offending, forcing his victims to go through the traumatic process of giving evidence at trial. He tried to convince the jury that he wasn't a bad paedophile and that he only did things that his victims wanted him to do. He showed no remorse and no understanding of the trauma he's caused so many people.
The police and many of Burrows' victims believe there are others who have never come forward. After Burrows was sacked from a school for abusing a boy 54 years ago, the judge said nothing was done. He was allowed to go quietly, allowed to go on to abuse many more boys. Greg Milam, Sky News.
After 2 years of brutal conflict, Sudan is in the midst of what's been described as the worst humanitarian crisis on record. Famine has spread across the country, and it's estimated more than 30 million people are in desperate need of aid. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, grew up in the country's capital, Khartoum, and returned to her childhood home to witness the devastation.
2 years of war and waiting to return to the city where I was born and the home I grew up in.
This is the first time we're going into Khartoum since the war started. And we take this road straight from the bridge all the way down to where my house is.
2 years of clinging to hope. But war is the enemy of hope. It crushes and gnarls, leaving behind the signs of hell.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. And it's not a celebration. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It feels like this was so unnecessary, so preventable. And now we're just going back to the ruins.
Millions have been displaced by this war. Tens of thousands killed and maimed by its violence. The city at the heart of Sudan is now empty. Even the lampposts have been stripped of wires and left to the weeds. My parents fled at the start of the war, convinced it would only last a few weeks. Their overgrown garden tells a much longer story, surrounded by the deserted homes of our displaced neighbors.
Okay, tamam.
We get the all clear to go in. There are no signs of unexploded munitions, but a bomb may have gone off nearby.
It's just so much grief. And at the same time, I know it could have been much worse. They could have been here when these guys came in.
The loss is confirmed. Our home of 25 years, once full of family and friends, and many of our memories, has been ransacked. Now a wasteland of all we cherish.
So this is where the family would sit. We'd wake up every morning and we'd come out and have some tea here.
Our house, like so many others, was occupied by the RSF, who captured Khartoum and claimed the homes in it, leading a mass looting campaign that will take generations to recover from.
They've wiped what looks like feces on the wall and then punctured a hole through this painting of my late grandmother and then just completely trashed my dad's office. And they did it because they could.
And then my bedroom, torn through and stripped of material value, with what I value discarded.
That's my university certificate. It's just another piece of rubbish, I guess.
This is one of the albums.
Yeah, it's a good album. Baba Khalid.
I call my mother to put her at ease.
Look at this old one of you as well.
But the grief erupts.
I never thought that I'll see my house like that. I mean, this is my house for the end of my life. I was supposed to die here in this house. I was supposed to be buried here in my country. I was supposed to enjoy my garden and my place. I was supposed to cook and cater for you and your children. I was supposed to be here for the rest of my life. Alhamdulillah, thank God for everything.
Now that the initial shock has subsided, I do feel a sense of closure. I feel a sense of acceptance. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty. But there is something salvageable, and that's enough. And there are many people, thousands of people, who won't get to rebuild, who didn't survive this war.
It's hard to see the life once lived here, under the dirt and desecration. But what they left in their hurry to steal is of the highest worth. The love shared in our home and our country. Light that's been dimmed by the darkness of war, but can never be truly put out. Yusra al-Baghir, Sky News, Khartoum.
Video which prosecutors claim shows the moment the iconic Sycamore Gap tree was cut down has been shown in court for the first time. The footage was released as part of the trial of two men who were jointly charged with causing criminal damage over the felling of the famous Northumberland tree. Here's our North of England correspondent, Shingi Mararike.
This was the moment a famous tree that stood for more than 150 years was cut down in a matter of minutes, the jury were told. You can hear the buzz of a chainsaw, see what appears to be the silhouette of a person alongside the tree, and then the trunk falling. That clip, digitally enhanced by Northumbria Police, was shown to the jury in the trial of Daniel Graham and Adam Carruthers, the pair who are accused of felling the Sycamore Gap tree in September 2023, causing thousands of pounds worth of damage to the tree and Hadrian's Wall which it fell onto. The prosecution accused the pair of taking part in a moronic mission and an act of mindless vandalism, which was recorded on Graham's phone. The two defendants live near the city of Carlisle in Cumbria. It's about 40 minutes from there to the Sycamore Gap tree, which is in a rural part of Northumberland, along Hadrian's Wall. It's alleged they travelled there together in Graham's car, with this CCTV from a pub showing headlights heading towards the nearest car park before the tree was felled. This was the next morning. Body-worn footage from the first police officer to arrive show him marking a crime scene.
If you could just clear back a tad, just a touch, just out of this main sort of area here, just so we can gather as much evidence as we can. Okay, thank you very much.
With onlookers trying to take a glimpse of the toppled tree. The court were told that while the country was reacting to the news the Sycamore Gap tree had been felled, Carruthers and Graham were commenting on the media coverage in these voice notes, with the prosecution arguing those discussions were a clear indication they were responsible.
Someone there's tagged like ITV News, BBC News, Sky News, like news. I think it's gonna go wild.
It's gone viral. It is worldwide. It will be on ITV News tonight.
It's on Sky News as we speak.
The court also heard from an archaeologist who investigated the damage to the wall. He called the tree totemic, referring to its place in people's personal lives and pop culture. With both defendants denying all the charges they face, the questions around what happened that night will continue to be examined as the trial goes on. Chingy Marike, Sky News, Newcastle Crown Court.
The King has told charities and those who help people living with cancer that his diagnosis brought the very best of humanity into sharp focus. He was reflecting on his illness in a deeply personal message, describing the daunting and at times frightening experience as he hosted a reception celebrating cancer organisations at Buckingham Palace. Here's our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills.
The buzz in the room was amazing. The King really wanted to make himself part of this community, sharing his own cancer diagnosis, and for this reception, writing most personal of messages. Each diagnosis, each new case, he wrote, will be a daunting and at times frightening experience for those individuals and their loved ones. But as one among those statistics myself, I can vouch for the fact that it can also be an experience that brings into sharp focus the very best of humanity. And it has reinforced what I've long observed during these visits, that the darkest moments of illness can be illuminated by the greatest compassion. His openness has been striking. We know that his treatment is still ongoing, but we still don't know what kind of cancer he has. Deciding what to share, an issue also faced by others who've publicly been through it, like Rich D. Grant, who lost his wife, the Duchess of York, who had breast cancer, and the parents of Dame Deborah James, or Bowel Babe, as she became known through her campaigning.
The difference of anybody being open and honest is so vast, and for him to step up and do it, that would make a difference to so many individuals. They'd just be prepared. If he can talk about it, I can talk about it. And that's really what Deborah was about and what we're about.
The King ended his message paying tribute to Deborah and quoting her final words: to live life with rebellious hope. A new motto for the monarch, whatever that may look like when you're a husband, father and head of state. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News at Buckingham Palace.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's comment editor, Annabel Denham. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of The Guardian in the wake of President Trump's latest claims about the state of the US economy. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.